My fellow citizens, I would like to thank Her Excellency, Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, President of the Republic of Liberia, for fulfilling her constitutional obligation by delivering the annual message to the 53rd Legislature. As you may already be aware, the President routinely praises her administration for maintaining democracy through the exercise of freedom of speech and the press in Liberia, which, incidentally, are both guaranteed by our Constitution. Accordingly, I seize this opportunity hereby to participate in the democratic process by exercising my constitutional right as a Liberian citizen and as a political leader of the newly formed and organized All Liberian Party, the ALP. Specifically, I would make salient comments about the President's annual message. And on behalf of the ALP, I wish to commence with some general observations. Indeed, I wish to remind the President that while we are pleased with the level of political tolerance prevailing in this country, no one person or administration can single-handedly claim this achievement. For the stability we have enjoyed over the nearly 13 years of post-war development is collective, as we have all sought to maintain the peace and stability that dwells in our land. We must also be equally keen to thank all Liberians for their commitment to peaceful coexistence despite political, religious, tribal, ethnic, and gender differences. All Liberians are keepers of the peace, and we are duty-bound in thanking UNMIL for ensuring that security conditions under which we have sought to build our lives towards an improved climate of stability in Liberia over this post-war period. Lest we forget, while we have made much progress in maintaining stability with the presence of foreign troops, it must be underscored that only social cohesion brought about by shared prosperity and respect for the rights of all can guarantee our stability now and into the foreseeable future. Let it be further emphasized that without human security, there can be no economic growth, and certainly no socio-economic development. More importantly, respect for the rules of law is sine qua non, and only a transparent system of justice can ensure an orderly society. My fellow citizens, the All Liberian Party, the ALP, urges the government of Liberia to put more resources and efforts to ensure that we can fill the perilous gap when UNMIL is mandated to put full security in our hands by June 30th of this year. Already, several reports, including that which was issued in May of the year 2015, by Karen Lindgren, former Special Representative of the Secretary General, the SRSG, to the UN Security Council, talked about the transitional plan that necessitates the filling of a deep gap across sectors and the challenges that must be met by the government's ambitious plan to defray the cost of filling the gap from its budget. It has been proven from the President's annual message that deep cuts within the budget will mean more challenges in filling the gaps after UNMIL depart. How can we fill the gaps left by UNMIL in the face of an exploding budget shortfall brought about by what the President called exogenous factors, such as the drastic decline in the price of iron ore and that of the price of rubber? Why weren't these exogenous factors considered as part of the budget projection since the current budget was developed and approved only about 7 months ago, when there were already drastic reductions in the price of our primary commodity exports, like rubber and iron ore? Moreover, recent events in Liberia are troubling and do not portend well for an orderly and sustained state of security. If you can recall, there have been 37 cases of mob violence reported by UNMIL over the past few years, where police stations were burned and citizens threatened to be murdered and raped, in some cases by police officers. In one of the most dramatic cases of mob violence, a prominent citizen of Kanta was accused of ritualistic killing, and his home and businesses were burned. Mob violence threatening our stability because citizens do not have trust in our justice system. Less than a month ago, senior officers of the Liberian National Police Force, the LNP, and the Executive Protective Services were involved in a street brawl in the full glare of citizens and foreign dignitaries during a funeral of the late Liberian ambassador to the Court of St. James, His Excellency Rudolph von Bamus. During that terrible incident, the vehicle driven by the Inspector General of Police was rammed and damaged, while fisticuffs ensued between members of both security services. Despite the fight that several weeks have been elapsed, we are still awaiting the outcome of the investigation into that embarrassing episode that occurred in central Monrovia, just a few yards from where the President was seated at the First United Methodist Church, the FUMC, in the funeral service over the ambassador. My fellow citizens, although some notable progress have been documented in our security sector, it is lamentable that the attrition rate in the newly formed military is exceedingly high and troubling. In fact, even the President admitted that it can be said that it undermined the effectiveness of the Army. According to a published report confirmed by Madam Sirleaf, the attrition rate in the Army is alarmingly placed at 10.42%, to be credible. Out of the total of 2,169 men and women who were trained by the Army as of 2012, 226 have deserted or is in the process of being discharged. And only 2% were linked to death, medical, or dishonorable discharges, while at least 9% went absent without leave, AWOL. These are certainly disturbing statistics. These are also the uncertain security circumstances under which the annual message was read by our head of state. Although President Sirleaf boldly stated that, and I quote, Liberia is safe and secure, unquote. We bemoan the reality that Liberia is neither safe nor secure for the majority of her citizens. Of course, there is comfort as it relates to those individuals who live in concrete houses, barricaded by 10-foot fences, and defended by private security or those provided by the state. They can sleep in peace, although not absolutely spared by the trepidation. But the fact is established for the vast majority of the citizens living in the rural area, especially for the millions in our urban centers, such as within Montserrat County, sleep at night is a challenge. Sleeping at night is a time of heightened prayer. In recent times, through an investigation carried out by the Liberian National Police, the LNP, Special Investigative Committee, armed men roam our cities at night, and they are terrorizing peaceful citizens. It saddened our hearts to learn that several hard-ranking police officers were reportedly aiding and abetting criminals by providing weapons and logistics. Madam President, the All-Liberian Party would inform you that although we can acknowledge some progress being made in the Health Millennium Development Goal, the MDG, your assertion that maternal mortality is decreasing is incorrect. As a matter of fact, maternal mortality increased from 994 per 100,000 to 1,072 per 100,000, according to our Liberian Demographic and Health Survey of 2013. My fellow citizens, we will patiently await a concise report on the true state of our economy from our president. And I repeat, we will patiently await a concise report on the true state of the economy from our president. The Constitution required that the president is duly responsible to present the economic condition of the republic. We must remind the president to tell us the state of our economy for 2015, the year under review, and not what she accomplished a decade ago. What she did today, in large measure, was to recite the processes of her administration from as early as her maiden message. She sounded more like one presenting an overview or a farewell message. We applauded those moments a decade ago when she inherited an economy where GDP had shrunk by 90%, when there was a reduction of the debt overhang by $4.9 billion and attracting $16 billion in foreign direct investment. Unfortunately, as it stands, Liberia is indexed as the fourth poorest country on the planet, with more than 80% of its population living on an international poverty line of US $1.25 daily. Nowhere near has half of that $16 billion been invested. And the president was prudent to admit that only $4.2 billion have been mobilized, and that is mostly in the extractive sector, where in 2012, only 800 jobs were created in mining and panning, according to the Ministry of Labor. So, what is the economic condition of our republic? Indeed, the true economic condition of the republic would cite that Liberians are experiencing severe hardship due to mismanagement of state resources, including the granting of natural resources to companies that have no technical or financial ability to sustainably develop them. Liberia and Liberians are experiencing hardship because of a bloated bureaucracy, where almost 50,000 people work in government, earning more than 10% of our gross domestic product, and assuming and consuming a grand total of nearly 80% of our national budget. Meanwhile, official development assistance, or foreign aid, is more than 100% of our budget at $120 million for the fiscal period 2014 and 2015. The ALP asks, with this kind of support, why are our Liberians experiencing such grave hardship? Liberians are also experiencing hardship directly due to the high rate of corruption, especially in high places, and the glaring lack of transparency that accompanied the implementation of a plan that was designed to provide affordable energy to Liberia, one which will enable economic growth and development. Instead of concentrating on liberalizing the energy sector and providing cheap and affordable energy by rebuilding Mount Coffee, in the early days of the administration, the president and her minion conceived a scheme that resulted in an invitation to a company called Buchanan Renewable Energy. Its purpose being to chop old rubber trees for use as biomass for energy production. In quick and unbelievable action, the company was sold from one partner to another that eventually made the sponsors extremely rich. And it never produced 1 megawatt of electricity. Only charcoal was produced and priced at approximately $5 a bag. That deal with rubber wood was a source of energy obstructed. It actually obstructed the hydro project, and thus we are where we are today because of people's self-interest. Today, Liberians are paying the highest amount for electricity in the world, at more than 60 cents per kilowatts an hour. adding to our woes, only 1.7% of Liberians are on the electricity grid. The president boasts about increasing output to 127 kilowatts by 2017. But at that rate, only a very small percentage of the country will be on the electricity grid, and ensuring that the binding constraints to growth and development, such as electricity and road, will remain largely unresolved even after a dozen years in power, which is equivalent to almost a half of a generation. No wonder then that the president is pursuing the prospect for the election of Vice President Joseph Boyka in 2017 to ensure that she and her unity party consume a whole generation, 25 years, to bring electricity to the majority of Liberians. We are pleased that the president announced that she is finally comfortable with plans to improve agricultural production in Liberia. But, of course, we are not sure that the epiphany came from. And we must remind the president that there is nothing new in this framework that will accelerate agricultural growth and development. Banks hardly lend to agriculture. Only 4% of loans are lent to this sector. Yet more than 70% of the workforce is involved in agricultural production in this country. As it is, there are already several foundations planned to improve agricultural production, including the Agricultural Sector Investment Plan, the LASIP, and the Central Agricultural Research Institute, CARI, Strategic Plan of 2015 to 2025. How does the government intend to increase agricultural production and move up the value chain without reducing barriers such as access to finance, warehousing, storage, and transportation? More than 50% of agricultural production is lost to wastage, spoilage, due to the lack of storage and transportation. The president has refused to revitalize or fund a new agriculture bank since she took office over 10 years ago. How would agricultural production be financed under the current economic architecture without long-term finance from the banking system? How does the government intend to move farmers up the value chain? My fellow Liberians, we are highly concerned about the lack of a credible economic recovery plan that is innovative and creative and has strong private sector support that can provide short-run stabilization and long-term growth and development for a country's declining economy. We have reviewed the president's recommendation to improve economic outlooks, but we believe many of the proposals are rehashing the old recommendation that do not address the fundamental problems of low productivity, inefficiency, food insecurity, youth unemployment, abortive capacity, and a large problem of limited economic empowerment of Liberians in a foreign-dominated economy. In an added context, the president does not make a distinction on what constitutes a Liberian-owned company, and how we can address the century-old problem of the increasing gap between citizens and foreign residents. We cannot build social cohesion with the kind of income inequality gap that the insubordinate concentration on foreign direct investment makes to the near explosion of domestic capital formation that have been produced. We propose that the government of Liberia and the private sector re-engage holistically to revise this sector specific recommendation to reverse economic decline. Without clear, quantifiable benchmarks and targets, a broad list of recommendations can only be considered as a shopping list without projected outcomes. Therefore, we will propose that the government of Liberia re-engage all sectors, principally through business support organization, the BSO, farming cooperatives, the labor union, etc., within the next 90 days to come up with a more sustainable set of recommendations that will address many of the factors contributing to the declining growth, reduction in revenue, and ultimately a reversal in the socio-economic indicators. Finally, fellow citizens, the surge of corruption is the single most destructive element to build a strong economy. Corruption corrodes the fabric of a nation. It undermines social cohesion. It destabilizes economies. Madam President, you began your administration with the mantra declaring zero tolerance for corruption. Unfortunately, we have not seen the kind of support required and the public stand that must be presented in the fight against this surge. You have faltered in the first stage, the fight against corruption. While we thank you for proposing a fast-track court for corruption, we hope and we pray that your proposal is not forgotten, as we will hold your feet to the fire to ensure that we can begin the war to increase or eliminate the insidious catastrophe of academic corruption. We thank you, fellow Liberians.